of the Indegene Digital Summit. Today, we are hosting the medical device panel. Before we get into introductions, let me quickly set the context for you guys. And all of you know this, healthcare has always been a very face-to-face industry. Our medical representatives go to the doctor, build a relationship, close a sale. But last few years, and a very strong investment into digital has changed that a little bit. It has proved that not only can sales be driven largely through a digital channel, but it's also very, very cost effective. Now, what we have to decide for ourselves as an industry, that is way forward going to be digital first, or are we probably going to go back to a little bit more face-to-face, in-person kind of a channel? And to discuss all of this, I have three stalwarts of the industry with me today, joining me for this panel. And I hope that through this panel, we'll be able to get some insights into how the industry, both large and small, is thinking about this. Let me start by introducing Lisa to you. Lisa is the Vice President for Echo. She runs business development and strategy for the company, has been in the industry for more than 25 years, not just healthcare, but beyond. Before joining Echo, she was with Amgen, spent 15 years there. In her last role, she was the executive director and head of marketing for the US region. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. Great to be here. Really looking forward to this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Next, let me introduce Ashutosh Banerjee. Ashutosh Banerjee is the global head for the cardiology division for GE Healthcare. Has been with the company now for 10 years. Has played variety of roles, right from leading the marketing function for the Life Care Solutions business, running the business for South Asia, and now leading the cardiology division globally. Before this, Ashutosh has spent time in various consumer industries and comes to us with a knowledge of not just the healthcare industry, but also the cross sections. Really excited to have you here, Ashutosh, with us and discuss some of these important topics.
Happy to be here, Mark. Thank you very much.
Last but not the least, let me introduce Dr. Vineet Basotia. He's a financial genius. I've had the pleasure of working with him at GE, where he spent, actually set up from scratch the data analytics practice for the company. I remember taking it from like literally 2 or 3 people to a strong 100 people team working on analytics for the company overall, healthcare overall. Now he's at Philips leading the global digital data practice for the company. Really excited to have you here, Vineet, and looking forward to your insights.
Very excited as well, Marul. Thank you. Thanks for the invite, and look forward to it.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll jump right into it. There are a few things that I have on my mind, and let me start by asking Ashutosh the first question. Ashutosh, last 2-3 years, you have seen the disruption. There has been digital adoption. People have turned from digital, I don't want it, there is nothing else I can do, not just in the commercial side of the house, but largely in a broader section of the organization. Where do you see this going? Do you see this tapering off? Do you see this becoming more prominent? And again, not just in the commercial side of the house, but overall.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something we think about and plan for daily. As I'm sure my colleagues will also, my friends here will also talk about. So I would give you an anecdote to begin with, which will illustrate how the world has changed. So before COVID, when you wanted to go meet a customer, a meeting with a customer would definitely be an in-person meeting. There was nothing called an in-person and virtual, by the way, then, right? A meeting was a meeting. You would travel for it and you go meet them, right? So it went from that to customers telling us, don't come visit us. Let's get onto Zoom or some Teams or some meeting there, right? And then let's do a meeting. I was trying to get a meeting with Mayo recently, and after COVID, tired of sitting at home. So we said, can we just come and meet you? They said, no need. Let's just get on the phone and the Zoom and let's talk. And then if required, we'll come and meet, right? So this is an illustration of how the world has changed, right? I would say that any tech adoption depends on people adopting it and changing their mindset. COVID has actually shown us that it does not need us to be in person all the time for us to be effective, right? It has shown us that while we as human beings need to be in touch and together and in person, but we are more efficient when we can combine it and be hybrid, right? So like this panel right now, we are hybrid. but Marut, you and I have met before, and that's the reason we can sort of do this, right? So I think the world is going towards a hybrid mode where the video capabilities, now that they are much better than what we had before, and the outreach on commercial, the technology, and even in engineering, when we do product development, we use a combination of video abilities, and that allows us to reach more customers, get more inputs, right? And we also do some in-person checks. So I think the world is definitely moving towards a combination of in-person as well as virtual modes. And the virtual technologies are really much better than they used to be. And we are also gearing to make sure that we put that in our roadmap. We plan for being virtual as well as in person.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Listen, I still remember our long drives in Bangalore traffic, and trust me, I'm not missing them. Right. So absolutely. And I'm sure your CFO loves it, the hybrid model. So
Yep.
how are things different in Amsterdam, Vineet?
No, I think I can totally, kind of connect with what Ashutosh is saying. It's a very different world. If you just take a very fundamental angle, like we all talk about customer centricity, and when you talk about customer centricity, you need to make your go-to-market, your product thinking, your commercial thinking, your marketing thinking centric to the customer. Our customers have drastically changed. I think, as Ashutosh is saying, the way they engage, what they open, what they look, is very different. Even mediums like TikTok are today probably, hitting in some of the consumer side of healthcare, but on the B2B side, again, we are seeing a drastic change. Generally, you would expect, a little bit of a lag, but as you get into a customer site, as you get into the discussions, when you get into the sales pitch, when you get into the marketing campaigns, the transformation has hit it all. I think I can totally connect to that. And inverse, and because of that, I think the operations, the analytics, the way of working, the way organizations are shaping themselves is also seeing a pivotal change for sure. So
No, absolutely. You bring in a very interesting point on customer centricity. It's not just about saving time, effort, money by going digital. I mean, you can be there the next minute if you're doing this virtually. If your process lends to connecting virtually, you can do this much faster than having to book a ticket, going and visiting a customer, and then having the same discussion possible.
exactly. I think one thought which was coming in my mind as I was thinking of this session was, is it how much of the transform has actually become perform? So, for us in the organization, what was transformational and innovative that hey, become more digital today is like maybe day-to-day matter. I mean, it has become about performing a lot also. So it's touching us much more. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Lisa, I mean, listen, for GE and for Philips, you're right, these are transformations. But for Echo, this a new age company trying to develop and set up business or scale business in this environment, how has your experience been for last 2-3 years on the digital side?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously much earlier in our journey. So in terms of communication with customers, a lot of that is still trying to help them understand a very new way of doing things. But I really appreciated what Ashutosh was talking about in terms of how communication has become hybrid, and then what Vineet was saying in terms of, how do you go about communicating and how can you be relevant? And that to me is really where the crux of it is, because we're all, I mean, I don't know about you, we all get like hundreds of emails every day. And whether it, whichever social platform you're on, it's just overwhelming. So how can we get that communication relevance and the personalization, which breeds trust? We previously relied on these in-person communications to have that trust aspect of it. And so I think that the onus on us to deeply understand our customers still exists. And we've got a lot more tools at our disposal now with digital to be able to do that. And so it's bringing together both the personal insight, the the understanding of the impact of all this change to our customers as well, and bringing that together, that's the digital and the first-hand understanding. And then that way, really, I think, deliver true customer centricity. And which I think is an important goal that we're all striving for. I don't think we're quite there yet, but we make progress all the time.
No, absolutely. And in fact, it reminds me of a very interesting report that one of our subsidiaries, DT Consulting, wrote a year back, which spoke about how we are using all these channels, email, social media, to reach out to our customers. But a cohesive strategy, a cohesive customer journey is still elusive for many, many companies. And I'll be happy to send it to all three of you after this panel. But it's very interesting to see that while we are all trying from different angles to get to that point, where we have one customer journey, where we can engage the customer through different omni-channel marketing, if you will, but it's not been easy. Right? I mean, it's been very, very difficult to do. So let me pivot a little, and maybe Lisa, ask you this question, that when we start thinking about digital, I think the first go-to thought is marketing, sales, reaching out to the customers. But I mean, you guys are doing a lot more, especially in the AI space, leveraging all the data that you have, and medical imaging in general lends itself a lot to using AI and data. So what has been your experience in that space of digital, if you will?
I'm so excited that you asked that question, because it's near and dear to my heart. And we all know that rapidly advancing AI is behind so much of what we do: our GPS, restaurant, hotel recommendations, news feeds, social media, etc. In healthcare, AI is still pretty young, but it's got a ton of promise. And I do see the replicability beyond medical imaging. The arena is vast there, whether it's population health and then, of course, customer communication. But for now, just in my remarks, I'm going to focus a little on the former in terms of how much there is to deliver on AI on so many fronts. On a technology perspective, that's just the development of the AI itself. It can provide key insight, and we can talk a little bit more about that if we have time. Then there's the whole aspect of, if you're providing medical insight, what does the medical profession think of all of this? And what does it take to being accepted by the medical profession and then supported by it? And I think the two key questions that come to my mind are, one, does it work? Is it accurate? And how can I be sure of that? And then, will it replace me? So there's some discomfort that has come up. And I think the answer to the question, is it accurate? Absolutely. And there'll be trials to demonstrate that. And will it replace me? No, absolutely not. We'll have physicians being able to do, or clinicians do the really good work that they need to do, but in a way that can impact population health much more effectively. And then, of course, there's new cost models and definitions that to date are still a work in progress. So there are a few great examples of successes that we've seen. I think the one that I like to refer to, but just over a year ago, the American Medical Association awarded Zebra Medical the first billing code with AI related to CT scans to detect vertebral compression fractures. So many of you may know that. But what for me is intriguing is that this was incidental findings. You are doing CT scanning, and it wasn't to detect fracture, but that's what you could do. And so, yes, there is massive investment. If you'll indulge me, I thought I'd give just a little immersive experiment to help bring this to life, if everyone can just imagine that. So we've all been exposed to medical imaging in one way or another, and I'm guessing we can also recall our last experience. So put yourself in that situation. And typically, clinician writes an order for some sort of imaging, and then we come on a different day if it's not urgent, or we triage to another area of a hospital or clinic, and then there's a specialist, and the specialist awaits to capture the imaging. And then there's a different specialist which interprets the imaging, and then we get to hear our fate, potentially after some delays. So we wait around a lot, we see multiple healthcare providers, we go to the scan. The machine costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and highly specialized folks are required to do this. But today we're seeing, I think, the convergence of two disruptive but very positive opportunities with the promise of AI. The one, of course, is just that hardware technology innovation is rife, and it's shrinking the size and increasing portability and lowering costs. So the ability to bring the imaging to us is increasing. But as one of my colleagues always says, you can't put a cardiologist or sonographer in your pocket. So I love that. But the use of AI provides the support in several areas because it can counter for the difficulties of specialists to be able to capture the images and the skill required to interpret the images. And then in between, it's all this tedious, time-consuming, repetitive tasks, measuring, labeling, documenting, etc. So the promise of AI is to drive consistency, time-saving, accuracy, ease, and it ultimately allow lesser trained individuals to capture images and interpret them, and then be able to triage the patient appropriately at much lower cost. I hope I'm sounding excited because I think that the world out there is just, it's phenomenal as to what can happen. And I don't think it's that far away, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, when we will all have access to those imaging technologies ourselves with our own personal devices that we can afford. And we'll have the AI to be able to tell us a lot. And then also through telemedicine, we can talk about that another time, be able to get the right input and advice. So I'd encourage everybody to immerse ourselves in the world of AI. I didn't get to the role of data. If we've got time, we can talk about that. I also think there's huge opportunity for device pharma collaborations to greatly influence population health. But I'll leave it at that for now.
No, listen, it's obviously very, very exciting, and a lot of us in this forum and in the audience share that excitement with you. And not just in terms of efficiency, Lisa. I mean, think about the resource-constrained environment. Think about Africa. Having AI interpretation given to you immediately after the scan or through the scan can literally save lives where you have you don't have the right doctors. I mean, you talk about advanced things like labeling and stuff. I mean, these are really good to have in those environments. And if you can tell the pregnant women at that point in time if the baby is at risk and, to that extent, drive intervention, I think these technologies are really, really powerful, not just in terms of efficiency, but also to some extent even saving lives. So listen, I can't agree more to what you said.
Yeah, Marina, just to add one comment to that and put a pin on it is more than half of all deaths in childbirth in areas like Africa are because the baby was breech or their twins or it's placenta previa, which are all incredibly common in terms of how we might associate with it in the sort of more developed world. And all of those can be addressed so easily with, in this case, ultrasound, which you can do at the bedside to be able to triage the patient appropriately. So I 100% agree with you that it's this convergence of the lower cost machinery together with AI that's going to enable rural healthcare. It's just dramatic and exponential.
No, absolutely. I think you and I should stop geeking around on this one and let Ashutosh chime in a little bit on this as well.
If you, I could chime in if you like. So, I agree with Lisa wholeheartedly. I think the potential is immense, and there is enough and more that we can do. To maybe take it up a level, I would just say that the potential of AI is not just in terms of helping clinicians. It's also extending the reach of clinicians to when the clinician is not at the bedside, right? So what, Lisa, you talked about is sort of like diagnosis and triage and early detection, right? There is the potential in the hospital itself to make sure that you are able to take care of patients when the clinician is not at the bedside. There is potential to complete care continuum pathways, right? And that's a big word, but it essentially means that when the patient leaves the hospital, the data doesn't get lost, right? Or when you come in from the hospital, the doctor doesn't tell you, well, I don't know what happened to you the last 6 months, let's do tests all over again. And if you have something like arrhythmia or AFib, then you don't develop that in the hospital, then you don't get diagnosed, right? Whereas in the last 6 months, you would have so many instances, you could have captured that and put that in the patient record, then you would have been able to catch it. So there is work that needs to happen in the data strategy as well. Data today is siloed all over the place, right? There is no AI without data. So we have to ensure that the data flows through in one place and you have all the data required to make make a diagnosis or make an information or create an insight, right? So that's the first step. And that's something that we think about, work towards every day. It's also in the hospital making the workflows where clinicians are not at the bedside more efficient with that data and making the information flow seamless. And then looking at population and also looking at specific cohorts in the population, like cardiology, we always think about a few kinds of people. So people with hypertension, that's always the first, that's most often the first indication of something that can go wrong. But most often that is something which is ignored. 35% of people around the world have hypertension, me included. But if you manage it really well, then it's something that you can live with and it won't affect your life. But guess what? People don't manage it well. They don't exercise, they don't eat right, and they don't monitor their pressure and weight, right? And guess what? They'll end up in the hospital with something that could have been prevented. So if we can create systems that monitor cohorts of people who are known to have higher risk and tie that into the hospital record, so you are able to be proactive about making people healthy, keeping them healthy, and hence preventing them coming into the hospital. So that's the third kind of work that is happening and needs to continue to happen. And I think we all need to stack our hands together. So not just, I think Philips or GE, but also what Lisa is doing at Echo. And, we have similar, of course, Lisa, that we have similar things here, but one company alone is not able to solve the puzzle. There is a need for all of us to come together and, sort of stack hands and ensure that we have this continuum of care that will really get the clinicians what they need and will help patients manage their own health.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a lovely thought, Ashutosh. And I'm going to pull on the thread that you spoke about data being siloed, not being mature. And Dr. Vineet, listen, I don't know anybody better to answer and put this in perspective for us, right? I mean, you have set up data practices from scratch. So would love to get your thought on the maturity of some of this data sets, maturity of the processes across organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Marut, first of all, I'm really enjoying the discussion, and especially the clinical angle and the user cases is very exciting. I think it's an industry which probably needs it the most because it touches lives, right? Like it touches our patients, and what can be a better thing than making healthcare's reachability, penetration, and you talked about Africa and user cases there. I mean, it's something which is like very close to all our hearts. Absolutely. Thinking more from a functional perspective, data perspective. To be very honest, I think the demand and the expectations are high. The internal mechanisms, the operations, the IT infrastructure, etc., needs to, in my view, what I've seen, step up a lot. But then, a lot is also happening because today, when I look at propositions or new value propositions coming, say, from a marketing organization, there has to be a AI wrap. You cannot be siloed box anymore. There is a huge expectation of bundling or integration, and companies need to start claiming that integration, and they need to really start showing that value to the customers. As I said in the beginning, the expectations have changed. However, in the last 4 or 5 years, especially during the COVID times, I have seen a bit of the step up. Sometimes I give this analogy to folks that 5 years back, I think data was sitting in different houses, and now it's probably come much more under the same roof. But is it really shaking hands the way we will want it to be? And are they really a family? Probably not yet. There's more to be done, and this is internal. And imagine making that work for our hospitals. Like you walk into any hospital today, you would probably want much more integration to be touched and felt. It's happening at a level where people are getting things on their apps, they're getting triggers, they're getting push notifications, they're probably getting better records. But are they really getting predictive insights on their mobile? Are we becoming really predictive? Not yet. However, I don't think somebody's selling a MR anymore without talking about AI on MR. I don't think anybody's selling a CD anymore without talking about AI and CD and data relations. So on the spectrum, I think we have progressed, but we'll continue to see a drastic change. Is my thought process. Yeah, I can go on this topic, but I think at the heart of it is outcomes. I think for customers when we are external, and outcomes for internal stakeholders when we are internal with data. And I think the value of the outcomes matters the most, and a lot more to do, I think, from a data perspective in this industry is what I would say. Yeah. So.
And before I open it for comment from Lisa and Ashutosh, I'm just thinking, right? And you brought in both the perspective, the internal perspective of an organization and external customer perspective. So when we think about the mental model on what success looks like, right? What should be our mental model for a short-term and a long-term success when we are thinking about driving large-scale, data-driven, AI or change, if you will?
Yeah, I can take a shot. I think for me, the success is really getting the outcomes for which the vision is set, right? So anytime when you have a new proposition, a new solution, a suite of solution or a offering, is the outcome the same? I think many of us have heard of many startups, big corporates trying it. I think we have heard the IBM story. We have heard the Microsofts, the Googles, and everybody in this fray. I think the plethora of startups is massive. But what really, really matters is the outcome at the patient level or at a customer level. And I think we want to see more outcome stories, is what I would say. The moment we start seeing that, like say, for example, if digital transformation made, a physician's understanding of, say, scans far superior, and that outcome is scalable and happen, that's what I would say. So I would put the metric at the outcome level is my take on it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That makes sense.
If I can jump in, only because Vinny, I'm 100% aligned with you. I think it's for nothing if it doesn't improve patient health and overall population health. That's the goal. Maybe if we try to break it down, it's like, are there success metrics that we can think about on the way? And I think this conversation has raised a bunch of them. It probably depends to some extent on where the technology is in the adoption cycle, the life cycle of the technology or medicine. And then, you spoke a little bit about governance and how data and technology adoption is going, and the need, Ashutosh, you spoke about the need for us to all collaborate, which I absolutely see. Because, I guess in the end, it follows at the highest level, the funnel that we're all familiar with, where there's awareness of what the possibilities are, the willingness to engage, particularly where it's new, and then to adoption and to conviction and so on. But I very firmly keep my eye on the end game, which is, are we actually making a difference in human life and outcomes, and even for those burnt out clinicians to enable them to deliver the healthcare.
Absolutely, I agree with both Vineet and Lisa on the need for focus on outcomes. I've seen so many startups fail just because it was a technology project which happened to have a commercial angle to it versus the other way around, right? I would add to that by bringing in two factors. One is the need to have a common standard for data, and I think Vineet, you may agree with me on that, because today the data standards are evolving. Some people have some different formats, others have other formats, which means that you cannot really bring everything together. So that is evolving. I know we have the data mesh discussion ongoing. That's a new technology that we are all trying to move towards. So I think we should work on that and ensure that we all in the industry have a standard agreement on what is the data standard that we all work towards, so we can all collaborate on that. Second thing I would say, when we focus on outcomes, which is the right thing to do, we also need to make sure our go-to-market and channel strategy enables us to sell that, right? Today, I'll actually put my neck out and say most of the sales teams around the world, in most companies, are box sellers. They don't know how to sell a solution, right? They will go say, well, here's my new shiny new box with this new AI tool, and forget about about what is it that the box really does, right? It saves lives, it helps find disease early, but that means that you have to have a conversation with a clinician at a deeper level. And that's something all of us organizations have to also think about. How do we enable our sales channels and our channel partners to talk about the outcome versus just talk about this new shiny AI feature that we all think we need, right? AI and digital are so overused and much maligned words today that we sometimes worry that we are saying digital and what does it really mean? Which part of digital are we talking about? So I think that education and training of our sales teams and channel teams to be able to talk to the outcome and really help people understand that and have a discussion around that is crucial, I would say. Not just making it, but enabling it to scale, right? So those would be two things I would add.
Oh, I think that's very well said, Ashwin. Yeah, I have like a list of questions in my chat window from the audience. So this is a long question, so I'm paraphrasing a little bit. The question is that from a competency standpoint, do the organizations, and hopefully we'll see some different answers here. You guys are agreeing too much. Does the organization have competency to take some of these innovations, right? I mean, you spoke about AI on an ultrasound, on a CT, on an MR, and then sales guys still selling it as a box. So is there a competency challenge? And if yes, how do you solve for it? And anyone can.
And the answer is obviously yes, there is a competency challenge, but I think it differs depending on which organization and what stage in the game that organization is in, right? So if I can say, maybe organizations with long histories like maybe Philips and GE, and Vinny, please feel free to disagree if you don't, if I'm saying something wrong. But I would say we have a lot of change to do because we are used to doing things a certain way in the pre-digital era, right? So there is a lot. So our organizations, we have to actually move, let's say, silos and matrices in the organization to make sure everybody moves in the right direction. But if it's a startup today that starts on the premise of an AI tool, it may be a shorter journey for them, right? So competency is definitely a problem, not just in the technology side. So technology side, the tools are open source. AI ML is not a secret. Everybody can use it, right? Even you and I can go and figure out the tools and start using it. It's about the use case. So that's where competency lies. You have to figure out the use case. What in the domain is crucial to be worked on, right? So once you solve that problem, there is a question of data. Do you have the right amount of data? Is it completely diverse enough? Are you perpetuating a problem of bias by the wrong set of data, right? Then when you have a solution, did we test it out with customers enough to make sure the workflows are right, right? Do these match with the existing workflows, or are we talking of completely overhauling stuff? It takes a long time in healthcare to change a workflow, right? So we rather want to fit in a workflow that exists today. And then lastly, the channel sales kind of problem. How do you scale? How do we make a product so that it scales, and how do we make the channel strategy scale, right? So I would say everyone is in a different stage in that journey, but at least to me, these are the 4 areas where I think we all need to focus on and ensure that we have the right strategies set in place. It requires change management. It requires financial metrics to change. When you think of AI, ML, digital offerings, they are usually subscription based. Companies who are in the old era or the old term ways of doing stuff, which is capex, they need to learn how to do subscription, and ARR and things like that are new terms that people don't understand that well. So a lot of education needs to happen and change management.
Oh, very well said.
Let's add a single line on that, Marut. Is that there is a change management and internal mindset thing, because there's a competency gap, and sometimes there's about the right choices also, right? Because the commercial models are still traditional, and the go-to-market Ashutosh mentioned needs also a shift. Like in many organizations, you'll see that if something is selling, you keep trying to sell that, right? So I think those are some areas where change management has to come, but it has to come because as I think it's all connected to the customer finally. So
yeah, it's so interesting to hear you talk, and maybe the end word is that this is where partnerships come back to it as well. But obviously, as a startup, we can design from the bottom up. And when we think about the development and implementation of these new technologies, we can think about it as an ecosystem. So it's not just about the device, although device advancement is critical. It's also, as we're talking before, it's about the software and the integration, and how do you enable the imaging to easily engage and interact and reach the EMR, and how do you make the documentation simple, and how do you get billing and so on. So it's that whole software component. And then, of course, there's the AI, just to make the whole exercise of diagnosis, interpretation, triage, and so on that much easier, and then the education elements. But then surrounding that, there's this ecosystem that we were talking about as we start to implement this and enable more widespread use. How does workflow change? And I'm thinking within the clinician world. And what does that mean for cost models? And I think those are still early stage, which I guess brings me back to this thought about partnerships. I think that even if there's one organization, or probably well more than one, that can imagine what the future could look like, we're going to have to think about partnerships and harnessing one another's expertise in terms of how we put it all together. And then also just to reinforce the value of it, the opportunity for it, working with the hospital systems to try and get IT departments to talk to one another and so on. So there's a ton of work to be done. I think that there's a ton of capability that's already in place. There's a capacity issue, and there's huge change management that's required. And I think it's going to take an army and not be easy. But the promise of better healthcare is there.
Absolutely. No, I think that really helps. And see, listen, I'm going to pick just one last question, given that we have 5 minutes. So this one is really exciting question, catches my fancy. So the question says, and Lisa, maybe we can start with you. How are both national and international policies and regulations helping in sustainability of AI-driven MedTech organizations?
Well, I don't know if they're helping at this stage. I think it's really important to be able to understand the differential needs of each country and the rules and the laws, as well as the regulatory bodies. So I think that the basic AI and how you understand the mechanics of it can be universally applied. But then one has to layer on top of that what the needs are, whether it's in Europe where there's certain data protections, whether it's in India where there's certain other data protections. And we were talking about maternal and fetal health. What are the things the characteristics of individuals that need to remain private and so on? So I do think that in all this development of and globalization of it, one still needs to understand the specific needs within each arena, regulatory basis, and then also how things get implemented, because how we might utilize regulatory bodies in the United States might be completely different from how we might do it in India or Africa or Asia, and so on. It's a very interesting question.
Yeah, and listen, and I know that EU is trying to drive a common guideline for AI, and not just for healthcare, by the way, across industries, and that's a very ambitious task force that EU has put together. I'm sure US has a very similar thought process, if you will, to put that guideline on. But to some extent, I think if these guidelines at some level harmonize with each other, it makes the job for innovation, for an innovator company, for a medtech organization, to that extent, a little bit easier. So maybe it's a wishful thinking for all of us that these international policy and regulations do help the sustainability of these initiatives, these new technologies, and new organizations.
I would just
that will get us there, Marin. Sorry, Ashutosh.
go ahead. I was just going to say that actually the regulators are also learning along with us. So if I take the US FDA, for example, the US FDA did bring out a white paper on their digital, regulations and how they would look at AI and how they would try to go faster. So, we know there is one certain company that really pushed them hard before they wanted to launch something on their watch, right? But I think the FDA is still learning, and it's an evolution. And I think all of us in the industry need to work with the regulators across the world to ensure that they bring in things that make it easy for us to bring the right innovation to market. However, we live in a medical industry, and we are responsible for the patient, so we can do no harm as well. So we all understand the limits put on what we do, right? Something that hinders in a way today, and I would say it carefully, are the data privacy laws, not from the point of protecting the patient, but from the point of making it difficult to scale across boundaries. Because, like in Europe, for example, you have to have separate instances in every country you go to, right? So, something to think about how we surmount and overcome. But I would say today, while the regulators have woken up to the fact that they need to support these AI initiatives and help make it easy, we are not in the place where we need to be or can be. But I think with the right industry participation and lobbying, I think we can get there, right? There are, for example, in remote patient monitoring in the US, there are a lot more reimbursement codes today than even 2 years ago. So things like that do help, right? And I think given the fact that there is momentum behind the need for digital health, virtual health, whatever you call it, which is all AI supported, I think we'll get there. We just need to be conscious about partnering with the regulators across the world and change the paradigm between being afraid of regulators maybe, but just going out there and working with them to make sure we all are in the right.
And that's super important when you talk about, sorry, Vinit. I mean, super important when you talk about healthcare, right? Because to some extent, we are dealing with human lives. So it cannot be one way that is the right way. And that collaboration is super important for us to all converge to an answer that works and is accepted a little bit more widely. Sorry, Vinit, you're saying something.
No, I know we probably on time as well, Marut, but I do want to say that the regulatory aspects around wearable technology on telehealth, on remote health, etc., should be closely watched. It can be a very interesting equalizer down the line, and probably will bridge things which probably were never thought of before, right? Like you could be in a remote village in Africa or India, and then suddenly you probably may get a similar attention. So we don't know. These are the things which could really be big change agents down the line. Yeah.
And I remember one of you mentioned TikTok early on. I mean, listen, it's not healthcare, but you're right. It's a great equalizer. The opportunity that you have sitting in the Western world, or the opportunity that you may have sitting in another remote corner, as long as you have internet, you could be a star, for lack of better words.
I heard marketers talking about TikTok nowadays. So,
which is, I mean, listen, 2 years ago, if somebody had told me that TikTok is going to be the next big thing and people in healthcare are going to talk about it, I wouldn't have believed it. But now, absolutely. Listen, Instagram, TikTok, yeah, why not? I'm sounding old, sorry. Go ahead, Ashutosh, you're saying something.
No, I agree with you completely. In fact, I would say Instagram, Facebook are almost things of the past now. They are something you have to have in your plan, right? And I agree with it. Actually, TikTok and the sort of the groups of people on there are the next frontier. We better engage there, otherwise we'll not catch the next generation of consumers and clinicians, even clinicians, right? Like on Twitter, electrophysiologists are a very potent force. We better be on Twitter to connect with them. Otherwise, you don't even know what's happening in that world. So, on the one hand, if you're not on that, you don't know what's happening. But on the other hand, it's an opportunity to stay connected with that community. So when you go meet them in conferences, it doesn't feel like you're meeting after a long time. You are in the conversation, and that just carries on, right? So it's a different world. It's a different way of doing marketing. It's like continuous touch versus sporadic touch in the past. So it's definitely a brave new world, I would say.
Absolutely. And on that note, I have a cue that I need to wrap up. But listen, more power to all of us in helping define the new standards, in helping the industry get to a point where technologies that can help the patient, that can literally take the care to the last mile, like AI, are a more potent force as we all kind of help redefine the way healthcare is delivered, the way we engage with our HCPs, and more importantly, the way we serve our patients. So thank you very, very much. I really appreciate all the insights and the time that you have spent on this. I won't even try to summarize. I mean, listen, these are incredible thoughts, and the recording for this session will be available on the system for quite some time. And I would really hope that the next generation of marketers, the next generation of data scientists, the next generation of people working on AI could really listen to this and get benefited in the way they approach delivering healthcare. On that note, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and look forward to continuing the discussion in different forums. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marut.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good session. Thank you.
Take care.